Good morning, everybody. As you know, the conflict between Ethiopians and Eritreans is continuing and then getting closer to war. And many Ethiopians and Eritreans are concerned about this. Not only us, but the whole world is concerned. The United Nations, the United States of America, African Union, and the European Union have expressed their concerns about this catastrophic would-be war. Because if the war starts, it will be very dangerous to the area, and then it would create a lot of problems to the Red Sea uh, routing, because war in that area will definitely create a lot of problems in terms of migration, in terms of refugees, in terms of displacement, in terms of deaths, rape, and a lot of things. We have experienced it, and then it is time for East Africans to cool down and concentrate on their own duties. However, this discussion, this concern is going to go on until something happens. And here I found a very interesting uh, discussion that I want to participate and then comment sometimes at some point. So
people had a fraction of your courage. So when I say the elite, I'm not really including you in them. I think if people had done a fraction of what you have been doing, we would be in a completely different position in terms of the country. So
hidden inside the wires of every home is a flaw, a silent leak that...
Don't worry, I was
for
not
you,
taking
respect.
it personally. I was not taking it personally. I was just
Yeah, but I think you
saying...
got the point. You got the point. You got why I'm frustrated, because for me, it's a tragedy that people should accept the state that Ethiopia is. Why should people accept it? It's a tragedy. Why should war become a fact of life in Ethiopia? Why is it that genocide, war, and destruction and displacement have become a rite of passage in the country? People
I think the main reason is because the Ethiopian intellectuals were concentrating on something that's impossible to do. Okay? They're concentrating on something impossible to do in relation to Eritrea, especially. It's because the Ethiopians have failed to accept the law, the regulations of the United Nations and coexist with their neighbors peacefully, to my understanding.
Have agency. They should try to change them. And when I reflect on these matters, it really gets into my nerves. Why is that? I mean, we're not cursed, really. But anyway, into the Eritrean issue, I think the issue in terms of Ethiopia and Eritrea always is that it seems that there is always something happening. There is a cloud of uncertainty, and sometimes it verges into war and that sort of dark reality. You'll have noticed yesterday Eritrea withdrew from the IGAD. Not that it is a serious organization, but maybe it's a sign of something brewing. And maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Ethiopian foreign minister gave a speech in relation to Eritrea, where basically, I think you have read it because you shared the article yesterday with me. His point essentially is that Eritrea is a troublemaker, that it has some sort of birth defect, and that it is up to Ethiopia to correct Eritrea in some sense. And you put everything together, and then the port issue, and the picture that emerges is not a positive one. What are your readings in terms of the Ethiopia and Eritrea?
First of all, Ethiopia to correct Eritreans' behavior. Sir, I think you have misconception, complete misconception of the reality. Eritrea has never caused a problem. Eritrea has always been defending itself. It will still defend itself if the situation gets to war. But Eritrea, listen up. Things, this is an old story. The United States of America, long time ago, used to say, now Ethiopia is destabilizing the region. Everybody is saying, so how can Ethiopia correct Eritrea? In what ways? Just because Eritreans have a tendency to protect themselves from intrusions, invasions, as usual, who has to correct itself? Ethiopia or Eritrea? I don't understand it, but let's see how the doctor answers the question.
I think I've lost you, Scale.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I read that the honeymoon is over. There was a honeymoon between Abiy and Eritrea. In the article that you just said that the whole article actually wants to totally obliterate that there was a love fest between the two in 2020, 21, 22, well, actually beginning in 2019. So it's over. It's now clear that it is over. It also shows that the honeymoon in the first place was basically the alliance was tactical, not strategic. An alliance that was really built on a shared enemy, on a common perceived enemy, but not based on long-term interests.
Pet stores are trying to ban this $39 robot puppy.
Love Fest has basically ended. That now that the division is clear, the fault line is clear. It's visible that Eritrea, look, during the Tigray war, Eritrea basically disarmed Ethiopia. So many divisions of the Ethiopian army, they attacked Tigray from Eritrea. And when they left all of their weapons in Eritrea, except their uniform. In fact, the Eritreans told the Ethiopian soldiers, you can't even take a shower here, just go and do it in your own country. So they left.
I think this is the first time I'm hearing. We've heard everything what happened from the Prime Minister himself and from his generals, that the Eritreans were completely cooperative with them. They armed them, they gave up arms actually to go fight in Tigray. The professor is saying they came with their arms to Eritrea, that's possible, but did they have a chance to come there with tanks and stuff like that? At the time, they were running to save themselves from the dangerous situations the TPLF created. It was accidental, they ran away, we armed them, we dressed them, and we sent them to fight back. And then whatever happened against the Tigrayans happened. Not the Tigrayans actually, but the TPLF happened. Well, if they had to fight in Tigray, sir, doctor, if they had to fight in Tigray, if the fighting was really in Tigray, where did the arms come from? Don't you think the arms had to go to Tigray with them too for the fighting? So how could Eritrea clean up the Ethiopian army's arms when actually the fighting was going on in Tigray? This is the first time I heard it, but it's your opinion, doctor. Let's continue.
Everything, the tanks, the automatic weapons, the long-range guns like the cannon and all those heavy weapons and light weapons and medium-range weapons, all kinds of munitions were left in Eritrea. So
how could they be left in Eritrea? My question is, didn't they need all these things to fight in Tigray against the TPLF? How did they fight if all these arms were in Eritrea? I just don't understand it. Because the fighting was going on in Tigray. And all these arms were necessary for Ethiopians to fight the TPLF, to my understanding. This is the first time I'm hearing this kind of news, probably the first time, actually. Because we heard what the Prime Minister said, we heard what the General said, but this is a new version of the story, to my understanding.
Ethiopia, by their own miscalculation, by their own short-term personalist relationship against a common enemy, perceived common enemy, by the way. Maybe the TPLF, Eritrea, the Eritrean leader had personal grudges against the TPLF that are real, personally, not Eritrea, but personally. He wanted revenge, he had wanted revenge, not a long-term issue, but a revenge for what had happened to him under the TPLF. And the TPLF went to war, in 1999, 1980, 98, and 2000, not for the TPLF, but for Ethiopia.
But Doctor, I hear you talking Eritrea went for revenge. It's possible. But don't you think Eritrea was colonized by the TPLF vis-a-vis Badme? Because we found out Badme was Eritrean to begin with. So the land of Eritrea partly was under the Tigrayan authority. So they couldn't agree. Well, this is what happened. Was claiming Badme at a point. They went to war, exchanged authority of the real state. They then went to the world for judgment, and the world gave its verdict. The international court gave its verdict that Badme was Eritrean. Therefore, Badme must have been colonized. It must have been colonized, basically. In part, Eritrea was colonized because Badme was occupied. They refused to leave after the court gave its verdict. This is how I understand the matter.
But right now, we're about, if we believe what the PP government is saying, that all of this didn't happen.
Well, one thing very interesting is, of course, the relationship could have been only tactical. To be strategic, the Algiers agreement had to be put on the ground. Then finally, both countries know their boundaries. The international community helps them demarcate it, and the game is over. But this is the problem. The Ethiopians always try to procrastinate it for some reason we don't understand, obviously, and then go to war, making it a cause for fighting. So to have permanent relationship, strategic relationship between the two countries, the border has to be demarcated according to the Algiers agreement.
So Eritrea disarmed Ethiopia, but now they fear that Ethiopia might be rearming itself against Eritrea. So there is really an armed, what is it called, the competition for arms, or arms race in the Horn of Africa. A huge arms race in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia is rearming, Eritrea is rearming, and the whole region is being armed. So there is this competition. Eritrea also fears, they've been fearing this, that the political fragmentation based on ethnic lines in Ethiopia might spill over to Eritrea. That is a concern for Eritreans. I know some elite sycophants say, oh, it's none of your business. But the Eritrean president speaks of this because, not because he fears it for Ethiopians, but he fears that it might spill over to Eritrea. He also fears that he might be sidelined by Abiy. Because
by the way, to clarify here, as far as I witnessed Eritrea coming back from the country recently, you can see my videos here. I made 9 nationalities, 9 tribes in Eritrea. Well, in Eritrea, nobody wants to overthrow the government. Therefore, the insecurity in Ethiopia, the ethnic division, has no way to transfer, to reflect in Eritrea, because there is no ethnic division or religious division in Eritrea. Of course, in so many other ways, it will affect us. For example, refugee crisis by itself is one big deal that Eritrea will have to take care of if this thing happens in Ethiopia, if something happens in Ethiopia. Okay, so far, no refugees as such, but I think that will be another problem. The other thing is, I don't think Isaias is afraid of being tapped by Abiy. Number one, Abiy is not capable of doing it. He has no cause, and the Eritrean people will not let him do it. The resistance will be so fierce, as usual, of all the times that President Isaias went through. This couldn't have been the worst experience he passed through, ladies and gentlemen. So, with the resistances in Ethiopia, I don't think Isaias Afwerki can be scared of being dislodged from his position by Abiy. I don't think so.
Ethiopia is a bigger country, so the big powers in that area, the regional powers in that area, might align with it against Eritrea. That is really a fundamental concern that Eritrea has. Not the little things that they talk about, ports and all that, but these are the fundamental disagreements that came to the surface once the honeymoon is over. And on the Ethiopian side, Ethiopia resents Eritrea's autonomy, because an autonomous Eritrea, and really this is important, an autonomous Eritrea could destabilize Ethiopia by supporting the dissident forces.
I don't think so. If there is democracy in Ethiopia, the way the relationship went between Abiy and Isaias Afwerki, well, if it was genuine as such, if it transferred to strategic relationships, you understand? Ethiopia shouldn't fear this. Eritrea has been supporting some resistance groups in Ethiopia for its sake, to protect itself, because Ethiopia always threatens. There has been always proxy war between the countries. But if Ethiopia decides to use our ports peacefully, this will disappear by default logic, and we can coexist peacefully. So the cause of all the problems is always Ethiopia, and we are always in a defensive mode of thinking, mode of life, basically. The way I look at it.
Eritrea could do more damage internationally through its connections with like-minded leaders in the region and outside the region. Eritrea has a strategic position in the Red Sea area, which they might farm out to one or the other power, the middle power, or any other power in that region, that they have that attraction.
Well, by the way, I do believe the Eritreans haven't tried that yet. There are no bases. No country has a base. In Eritrea, Russia, China, usually, United States, whatever. Eritrea assumes to resist all the problems free of domination by any force in the area. So it's not willing to have to give any country to build bases in Ethiopia, including Eritrea, including the Ethiopians I'm talking about. Sorry. Therefore, but the last card of the Eritreans, I always say, is this happens to be the norm of the situation. For us to stop it, we can align with one of the governments, big governments I'm talking about, and then can even be forced to give base to those countries, wherever they want to be, to protect ourselves. This is our last card. I always tell the Ethiopians, take care of this talk entertainment seriously, because if the worst comes, if we are pushed to the max and we cannot survive by our own, we can give up base to anybody and survive by that. Because I don't think Ethiopia has the courage to fight big forces. Look at what Djibouti is doing. What she's doing in Djibouti is because France is there. Ethiopia has to respect. We can bring authorities from Europe, Far East Asia, and even the United States of America, and give them best in our country to neutralize this danger, to neutralize this threat. I think that can be done very easily, but not at this point. But I'm not surprised if Eritrea entertains this issue as such, because it has been constantly harassed by the Ethiopian political adventurers.
Eritrea also resents Eritrea's continued rearmament or militarization, because an Eritrea that is autonomous, and an Eritrea that is heavily militarized, and an Eritrean leader adept at subverting his enemies. Keep in mind that he's been in power for more than 30 years by pitting one group against the other through his machinations, internationally and locally. He's a very mercurial leader. So Abiy fears that he might be the chosen leader if there is a regional normalization. All of these factors are really structural. So could this lead to war?
Well, if Abiy is ready to go sit with the Eritreans and to live peacefully by the law, the Eritreans have no problem at all. Actually, that's exactly what we want to do. These are the laws, ladies and gentlemen. Right of access of landlocked states to and from the sea and freedom of transit, especially Article 125, becomes very important here. All these countries are abided by that. The yellow countries in this map are landlocked countries in Africa. But it's only Ethiopia that raises this problem. And nobody stopped it from using the ports. It has options to use Port Sudan in Sudan, the two Eritrean ports, Port Djibouti, whatever. And then also Somalian ports and Kenyan ports. It doesn't have to cling to the Eritreans only. You understand what I'm saying? Unless it have colonial issues, unless it have hegemonic issues, unless it have imperialistic issues. As far as we see it, as Eritreans I'm talking about, we have been colonized by the Ethiopians, just like we were by the Italians and the British, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Eritrean state of mind. This is our state of political mind, ladies and gentlemen, and let's keep to the discussion.
I don't know. It looks like the Ethiopians are retreating. That Horn review is basically revealing a couple of issues that we might go to war. To summarize it, we might go to war, but if we go to war, it's not because of the port, or it's not because of geography, but because of Eritrea's fixation. So the narrative has changed in that we might go to war, but if you go to war, it's not because of us wanting the port. It's because of Eritrea.
Well, the fixation say
It's causes that are tipping both of them into war. What will trigger war? Could be anybody's guess. But did you say something about IGAD as well?
Professor, we're going to go to the IGAD issue, but right here is the so-said fixation. To my understanding, is Eritrean consistency with the law, consistency with the adverse argument. If that is the fixation you're talking about, I understand. I think that's how I understand. Eritreans refuse to beg for injustice, for domination, for colonialism, be it black colonialism or white colonialism. If you call this fixation, I understand that. I see your fixation. I understand it as Eritrean consistency to stand on its grounds.
Yeah, because Eritrea announced that it has left IGAD, and I thought that might be in reaction to, because the perception, I don't know how true it is that Ethiopia controls IGAD and that it is an agent for Ethiopia's interests. And I thought Eritrea withdrawing from that has something to do with the growing tension between the two countries.
Yeah, Eritrea has not been positive about African organizations in general. They have always looked down disdainfully on the AU.
Well, just to give you more information, there is a new editorial on the Horn Review website, which we presume is connected with the PP regime anyway. And the point they make is that Eritrea doesn't have a history of working with multilateral organizations, and that is the reason why it is found it difficult to work in IGAD.
Not really. IGAD is corrupt. IGAD was there to integrate the region economically, okay? Basically to make them together in defense, peace to the region, to solve the problems going on. The war in Ethiopia itself is IGAD's problem, but nobody that fix it. The guy in IGAD, to my understanding, is a personal friend of Abiy's. So it has become a puzzle for Eritreans to see this IGAD sitting down useless. Okay, it's doing nothing to resolve the problems. The difference between Ethiopia and Eritrea is doing nothing to resolve the problems within Ethiopia. It's doing nothing to resolve the problems in Sudan. Therefore, who can trust this organization? It is useless. The Eritreans tried to come in after separating for a while. To re-energize it, trusting Abiy would be one of the factors to this effect, but they failed, so they had to withdraw. So my understanding is a justified withdrawal that has no effect, political effect whatsoever.
Okay, we don't presume that the Horn Review is connected with the regime. It is the regime's mouthpiece because it's actually funded.
Well, I'm pretending to be a journalist. I'm pretending to be a journalist. So yeah, but I understand.
I understand that, but I'm just expressing my thoughts about that. That it's not a presumption. It is real, is what I'm trying to say. That yes, you use your words as a journalist, but I am not a journalist, so I put it in perspective that it is not a presumption. The Horn Review is basically a think tank under the Institute of Foreign Affairs, which is a part of the Ethiopian government, and the recent reorganization itself was done by the Ethiopian government. They work for the Ethiopian government. The notion that the Horn Review is an independent, by the way, this is actually talking to the Horn Review people. Their outrage when they're told that they're part of the government, they come up with this outrage as if that is not true. It is true you work for the government. So the Horn Review is a reflection, sort of appearing to be independent, but it is totally embedded in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it is controlled by the Prime Minister, and whatever they're writing should be seen as the view of the government. That's what I wanted to start.
This is the strangest way I've ever seen to eliminate the
read as the view of the Ethiopian government. That's the way it should be seen. So they always insist saying that they're not government affiliated, they're a think tank. You're not. You're not a think tank. You're not even a tank. You're not even thinking, as far as I'm concerned. You're the government of Ethiopia. Now back to the IGAD issue. That look, IGAD is not an independent entity. It's never been an independent entity, and it's not an independent entity right now. It hasn't achieved any of its goals. When it was established, it was established to fight drought and famine. It hasn't achieved its goals in that area. IGAD has not done nothing in those areas. And when it was reorganized or reformed recently from IGAD to IGAD, they put out their goal is to maintain peace and security, achieve food security and environmental protection, economic integration, and infrastructure building. Which one has IGAD done? It is economic integration. So it's when Eritrea says IGAD is kind of useless, there is a point there. So whether they are in IGAD or they are not in IGAD, it doesn't really matter because IGAD is not important. It just doesn't have the wherewithal, the brain capacity, the finance that would be necessary. The finance that would be necessary to achieve all of those goals. They don't have the money for it. So it's not a non-event as far as I'm concerned. Eritrea withdrawing from IGAD is a non-event. And it cannot be reduced to simply Eritrea's apparently childish tantrum that they get into an organization and get out of the organization when they. It's not a tantrum, but that does not mean that this is not symbolic. It's not about Eritrea's petulance, but it is not. It's not something that to be disregarded as well. It signals Eritrea's growing isolation in the IGAD area. And when I say this is really symbolic isolationism, that everybody fears Ethiopia. Djibouti fears Ethiopia, Kenya fears Ethiopia, Somalia fears Ethiopia, maybe Somalia has a little bit of courage, and the Somaliland fears Ethiopia because of its sheer size. So they're not going to antagonize Ethiopia, even though they speak to Eritrea. All of them speak to Eritrea. So there is this symbolic isolationism that Eritrea wants to reject. It also should be seen that Eritrea is really rejecting this.
But a little bit, of course, IGAD was supposed to integrate them economically, actually make peace, regional peace, diffuse their problems amicably, build infrastructures, encouraging them to do something, building roads, building houses for the homeless, improve the people's lives. But it has been partial, of course, the way we look at it. But Eritrea's withdrawal from IGAD will not affect it in any way. It had withdrawn a long time ago, it didn't matter, really. And then IGAD is partial, it cannot solve the problems, it cannot carry the burden of its responsibilities, it's got to go. Eritrea has to go away. The other countries may be scared of Ethiopia because of its bullism. They can stay there. Just hang it out. But Eritrea has no time for this. In any case, this signifies also the Eritrean people's or the government's determination to rules of law, okay, to impartial organizations. If you're partial, then Eritrea has to leave. This is what we saw. In any case, whether Ethiopia scares the neighborhood as such, whether it wants to bully the neighborhood, the Eritreans will continue to resist. And Eritrea has to correct the defects of what is called the IGAD. And one day we will come back, maybe, ladies and gentlemen, today, to this cause, we have discussed those kind of things, and the more discussions will have to come next time in the next show. Usually I don't do my shows more than 30 minutes. Usually. In many cases, so I like to stop the situation right here and then come back to the next discussion, which is very important. It is about whether Ethiopia recognizes the Eritreans or not, whether it recognizes the Eritrean nationhood or not. Right now, they don't want to recognize it. Who cares? The whole world does. So Ethiopia will remain isolated in this issue, and Eritrea has no problem about this. As long as Ethiopia doesn't come to invade us by force, then we're talking about serious war, and we will see who wins. The one who has the cause wins. In this situation, Eritrea cannot be defeated. Eritrea cannot be recolonized by Ethiopia. Eritrea cannot be divided by this colonial ambition of Ethiopians, and as usual, Abiy has to fall in this category. Abiy will have to go somewhere else to invade. He cannot do it in Eritrea, ladies and gentlemen. So today's discussion was very interesting. Okay, there is no port that Ethiopia gets by force. We know the rules, we know the regulations. That's why we sacrificed in our armed struggle and through the years to consolidate ourselves as a legitimate society in the areas. And then my show is over today. And thank you very much. I always appreciate the professor, his ideas and all that. But some Ethiopians are still in the illusion of mixing Eritrea with Ethiopia, which is mission impossible. I will see you next time in the next show. Thank you.